Human and being. The English language puts those two words so easily together to form one of the most inaccessible of all phrases, the human being. We all naturally feel to belong to this category, though none of us would be content to be named only as such. Only under extreme conditions, like in war or in prison, we declare that we are human beings. Human being makes tools, builds, organizes, creates, and destroys. With one hand, he points to the other that has created or destroyed. And this pointing hand makes him or her, I will call human being him from now on, painfully aware that he is not only the master, but also a captive of what he has created or destroyed. Animals too have a language, but it's only us that can deal with complicated structures, enabling us to tell stories. Human being simply wants to narrate and listen to his own story. But when do we recognize that a story is our own story? Well, I think the human being started to tell stories when he finally realized that there has been a great mistake somewhere, an irreversible one. Perhaps it was a sin, or it was just forgetting and losing the plant of immortality forever. A snake grabbed it and stole it forever. This was the beginning. First was the word, we declared. But with that word, the sky separated from the earth, the face lost its own image, and blood was shed. Since then, a god is killing another god inside us continuously. Like our words, we are created from this marriage of blood and images. What can I possibly tell you about freedom? Especially to you, a select group of professional journalists. As a writer of literature, I consider myself only an amateur columnist, and my career, which lasted altogether 5 years, was in fact a total failure. I was fired twice from the same newspaper, lost more or less all the status and respect that being a writer of literature could give me. I tasted poverty, subjected to a social lynch, in fact social death, in fact initiated by mass media, got several death threats, and finally got arrested. What could it possibly have been, this apple that I have bit into, or even offered perhaps to others, now ending up in this very real exile? A century ago, the physicist Rutherford bombarded a thin layer of gold with heavy particles and was shocked to see that they were reflecting back at him. It was like firing at a sheet of paper with a cannon and then observing that it strikes you back, he had said. He had accidentally discovered the nucleus of the atom. Unfortunately, we can't so easily name what that repeatedly strikes us in the face like a cannon, when only we send a few words to sheets of empty paper. I have no formulas, no solutions, raw recipes, I had announced as a novice columnist. I will make no demands and no requests to the power. I will simply try to be voice of the other. A text is either a cry or a judgment. I will try to voice the silenced or unheard screams of the victim. A scream is desolate, faceless, humanless, void as a single note of music. But screams never lie. Words are the only instruments I have in which screams, or maybe only their echoes vibrate, and sometimes, and rarely, turn into a tune. It's our job or reason of existence to give meaning to words and words to the meaning. This age-old mystery, this tragic dilemma, the human being, is our hopeless material. Everyone's story belongs to everyone. As we are doomed to see our own image at everything we look at, our face becomes visible as the background of reality is more and more complete. Never in my life words echoed as long as they did behind the stones and bars. When a lock is turned on you, or in fact a few big locks as if you were a wild animal, you can't even open a small one, but they lock you with several big ones. You start hearing the echoes of the word freedom. Dignity acquires a shape, a third dimension, bone and flesh when they shout at you. You have to take off your pants while entering into prison. With another word, so old-fashioned or cliché, solidarity, you survive the pain, the cold, the diseases, the humiliations. Holding on to one word, you stand up, and holding on to the another, you keep standing. Freedom is a word that can never be silenced, I wrote in my cell on a small paper, and smuggled it out. It was a Monday. My friends were playing prison songs for us behind the walls, and I heard them, or perhaps imagined them singing. Later on I learned that actually they were singing every Monday. The tune was there, but I was simply unable to hear. I was imprisoned because I couldn't stay too long deaf and mute to the call of this impossible phrase, belonging perhaps to a past or perhaps to its own future, the human being. I was put into a cell just because I wrote about the atrocities committed in a small Kurdish town named Cizre. I was and I still am on trial with a life sentence because I collected the last messages, voices, screams of 150 people buried alive in the cellars and tried to put them into literature in a newspaper column. Perhaps those who have read my articles find it difficult to understand how and why such humanistic texts can be seen as a threat to the system. My only guess is that this kind of text do not, and cannot compromise. If you decide to write about massacres or torture or concentration camps, and if you decide to leave the safer post of observation of the witness and try to tell the untellable, then you have crossed the point of no return. In this no man's zones, there are no hypocrisies or lies to lick the wounds. There is even no tenderness or mercy, not for the writer, not for the reader. But I think this no-compromise essence is in literature itself. It is not in me as a person. It is in the word. Literature as a mirror has long been shattered, but some of us still keep on groping among the broken glass, wandering through the dreams of a mirror, perhaps that has long turned into sand. For a grain of truth, only a bleeding hand can grasp. But the miracle of the word is eternal. It lies in the fact that it forever remains incompleted, forever remains to be said in the next sentence. I must remind you and myself that my story as a writer and a columnist is actually a very ordinary one. In a country that has currently jailed 150 journalists, or maybe 180. Turkey has imprisoned over 170 of its prominent writers and poets in its century-old history. And if you add up to this number academicians, publishers, artists, journalists, the number easily reaches thousands. It's a world record. Whenever our rulers want to show off their muscles, journalists have always been the first target. And over 100 journalists have been assassinated in the history of Turkish Republic, majority being Kurdish, and second group is the Armenians, mainly in 1915. Two names I would like to mention with great respect, pain and humiliation are Hrant Dink, an Armenian journalist and editor-in-chief of Agos, an old friend of mine who was shot in 2007, and his case, the case of the murderers, are still going on for 10 years without any resolution. And the other one is a Kurdish intellectual, Musa Anter. He was 70-year-old columnist. He was shot in the 90s. And Özgür Gündem, I'm so proud that they gave his column to me. This small newspaper, Özgür Gündem, so far had 76 casualties in its 25-year-old history. 30 of its journalists and columnists had been killed. The rest, 46, are reporters, staff, and mainly distributors. The list is actually very long if we go from all over the world, from Charlie Hebdo to Polinskaya, and no country is, of course, clean in that list. And one other name I would like to also mention, because he was killed in Turkey, just at the same time of Charlie Hebdo, Maci Serf. He was publishing a website, Wheat, in English, first in Syria, then he escaped to Turkey and very probably killed by ISIS. So in fact in Turkey in the 1970s, to be an important journalist was meant to be jailed or killed, or very often both. I would like to finish with a short story. In my second month in jail, a magazine I used to write for, Fil, it means elephant, literature and journalism together, monthly magazine, prepared a special issue on me, my literary work, journalistic work, and my imprisonment. One of their reporters went to Cizre, that small town I had written about. It was almost erased from the map, totally in ruins. And he asked to the people on the street what they think of Asli Erdogan's arrest. Those people had already lost almost everything. Their homes were gone, their streets were gone, their memories were gone. Their children were dead. A mother had kept the corpse of her baby in deep freeze for 10 days because she wasn't allowed to go out for the burial. And a 70-year-old woman's body lay a week in the streets because of the curfew. Those people of Cizre said they had no chance ever to read my articles. But they requested, please tell her, even if the whole world forgets her, we will never forget her. This is one of the rare, very rare moments in my life, and I actually cried, with gratitude. Everything, all acquired a meaning, and in fact a purpose. Nothing, not even my own life, was wasted. It is life that gives us meaning, says an old Brazilian song. Let me finish with a well-known sentence, a quote not from me. If you don't know the power of the words, you don't know the glory of the human. Many thanks for inviting me, listening to me, and for all the solidarity you have shown to me throughout my ordeal. How can I ever thank for my freedom?